Yo, what's up guys, welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to if you grew up in the 1980s, you remember this, Life in America. And yeah, I feel like a lot of you who watch my videos probably grew up in this era. And yeah, I've done a few reactions similar. I think there was one growing up in like the 60s, and then just stuff based off how school was in a certain era and just how things have changed and how different things were. And I've been finding them quite interesting, to be honest. But yeah, as I assume, and I know quite a few of the people who watch my reactions are from, like, who grew up in this era, it'll probably resonate to a lot more people. But I'm gonna learn. I'm gonna see how the world was different back in these times. I mean, yeah, I don't know what eras are typically seen as the best, but I feel like the 80s is probably up there. But yeah, let's check this out, and hopefully going to enjoy. Links are in the description to my Patreon if you want to see some more of my videos. But let's just check this out.
If you were a kid in the 1980s, you probably have fond memories of growing up during that time. You often spent afternoons at friends' houses, maybe even jumping on their trampoline.
I used to love going on my friend's trampoline. I never had one, and one of my friends did have one, and we used to all just go to his house and just go on this. I've probably spent hours on it, to be honest. I don't know what it is. It's such a simple creation, but it was quite satisfying to just jump on them as a kid.
Or watching MTV. You also kept yourself busy by making mixtapes and binge-watching rented movies from Blockbuster.
Did you say MTV? Was MTV around in the 80s? I mean, I don't know the history, but MTV in the 80s, I did not assume it would be that long ago. I thought that was like a late 90s thing, early 2000s, like it began then, but the more you know.
If this sounds like your childhood, then you will definitely relate to these 1980s memories.
Blockbuster is a throwback. Mr. T.
Do you remember being beyond excited to get up on Saturday mornings? The excitement of running to the TV and switching on Saturday morning cartoons and knowing you didn't have to go to school was a great feeling. Some of your favorite shows may have been Thundercats, He-Man, the Care Bears, or maybe even Pee-wee's Playhouse or the Smurfs.
The Smurfs was a TV show. I know it was a film. I didn't know the film was. It came from the TV show, the cartoon show. I didn't know it was a show.
You watched all of this while eating a big bowl of your favorite cereal. And in those days, it was all about the sugary cereals. Captain Crunch, Fruity Pebbles, Cocoa Puffs, and Cookie Crisp were just a few.
To be fair, Cocoa Puffs are Cocoa Pops, I assume. Do I know any of these cereals? I don't know any of them. Corn Pops. They're like, I feel like I've had them as well. They're really nice. Just like golden, what are they called? Golden balls or whatever. Frankenberry, Blueberry. Are some of these still cereals in the US? Maybe these are just big cereals in the US, but I've never seen them. Like it's Kellogg's and stuff, so it's big brands, but or they've just changed the names or something.
Your school days may be best remembered for playing the Oregon Trail, where you died from dysentery, lost cattle, and broke plenty of wagon wheels. When it was first introduced, this video game was meant to be educational, teaching kids about the grim realities in the American West during the 1800s.
What?
But it became so much more. When the teacher announced that it was time to play the Oregon Trail on the school computers, it felt like a gift from the heavens.
Wait, you were allowed to play. I guess this was like an educational thing, right? But you were allowed to play games when in the school in the 80s, or in certain schools in the 80s. Bro, if you got caught on games in my era, I mean, typically you just play the games and then just go off when the teacher comes past and then go back on. But you're not doing it for educational reasons. You're just being an idiot. But at the same time, you're in ICT or whatever. You're in IT. You just want to play games. But the fact that you'd play a game for educational reasons, and I guess it is because you learn, but in a way where kids would like to learn. It makes sense, but I can sort of relate to sort of understand how this would feel to just do in like a lesson, you know.
During the 80s, every young girl wanted a Cabbage Patch Kid.
Those are the scariest things I've ever seen.
The adoptable dolls were hard to come by, especially around Christmas. But once you got one, you were proud to show it off. If you weren't able to get one of those pricey dolls, you may have settled for a strawberry shortcake or a rainbow bright.
Bro, they didn't make them. They didn't make them in a way where you wouldn't find them scary. Obviously, you're a kid, you don't really think about that, but these are the sort of dolls that in 30, 40 years' time you go back to look at and you'll be creeped the hell out of, man. They would creep you out. Bro,
On the other hand, all the boys wanted a He-Man Masters of the Universe figure. In fact, they wanted to own all of the He-Man action figures, along with Castle Grayskull. The Rubiks Cube has been confounding kids and adults alike since its invention in 1974, but it was in its heyday in the early 1980s. In fact, one of the best-selling books of 1981 was The Simple Solution to Rubiks Cube, written by James Norse.
What the hell is this Rubiks Cube? That's a small one.
If the Rubiks Cube didn't do it for you, then maybe you were one of the lucky ones to get the first Nintendo Entertainment System on your block. This was the era that established classics like Super Mario Bros.
Damn, all the way from this? Oh my god. Imagine that, because now you have Mario, you have all access to anything, but in these times, there was games, right, but there's so little like to choose from. You'd get a game like Mario, imagine how much fun that would have been back then. Again, now it's fun, but you have so many different options, and you grew up with Mario or whatever other game, so you just know or whatever. Like, but here, man, you get this big game you've never heard of before, you've never seen before. You play it. Imagine how much that would have like just shocked you. I don't know, but as a kid, I can't imagine how much fun it would have been to get one of these consoles and then played one of these games in the mid 80s or whatever.
The Legend of Zelda, Metroid, and so many more. And if you had trouble getting a game to load, all you had to do was blow the dust out of the cartridge, and it seemed to work every time.
Oh, damn. Back when Nintendo was on top.
Friday nights were, for many, a blockbuster night. Stepping into that brightly lit Blockbuster store and seeing an endless selection of movies was a true thrill. It wasn't uncommon to leave with a stack of movies that would last you all weekend, and you could even get some popcorn or candy to go along with it.
The Evil Dead.
Maybe you were one of the ones that saved up your quarters all week so that you could head over to the arcade to play the newest games and hang out with friends. You tried your best to make it on the leaderboard whenever you played Pac-Man, Space Invaders, Asteroids, or Donkey Kong. During the 1980s, these dimly lit buildings would be packed with people, plunking quarters into those magical machines for hours on end.
Is that because not many people would have had consoles back in these times? So to really play games, you'd have to go to like an arcade to play one of these. Like compared to now, where anyone has a game console, or you have your PC where you can do it on your phone. I mean, arcades, there's still arcades dotted around. They're still fun, but it's usually for like the slots. You just sort of put like a small coin in, and you put loads of those small coins, and then eventually it will get pushed out. I don't know if it's the same in the US. I assume it's the same in the arcades there. You use like a cent coin. You get like 100 cent coins, and then you just keep putting them in, and it'll keep getting pushed until you get a silly item like, I don't know, a key ring or something. But back in these times, I guess it was more focused on actual games like this, video games, because these would be the only places where you could really play them. Damn, man. I can imagine in these times, these places would have been full to the brim, like arcades and stuff.
Who didn't own a few Garbage Pail Kids during the 1980s?
The fuck?
These funny cards became a big hit because they depicted children that looked like Cabbage Patch Kids.
What is this Cabbage Patch Kid thing? It's so creepy. But they were popular, fair enough, but what the hell?
But they had creatively rhyming names. From the grossest to the scariest, Garbage Pail Kids were always good for a laugh. But the gum that came inside the packs was some of the hardest, most stale gum you may have ever chewed on.
I thought there was gum in it? What the hell?
Growing up in the 80s, you may have also been an avid reader. Book series like The Babysitter's Club, Sweet Valley High, or Choose Your Own Adventure were some of the very best the decade had to offer. Judy Blume and Beverly Cleary books became must-reads, and a big incentive for reading all these books was a free pizza from the Pizza Hut Book It campaign.
Oh, damn, that sounds banging. As a kid, I would love that. Hulk
It seemed
Hogan.
like every kid growing up in the 1980s was a huge wrestling fan.
Yeah, this was like I feel like this was probably the prime year, right, of wrestling. I do find wrestling funny. I don't really watch it, right, but there's some clips from it that are so funny. Obviously, it's so fake, but that's the funny part. And the storylines just kill me and all this stuff, but I don't watch wrestling, but I do have seen clips. And then when I was younger, I used to love watching like the Royal Rumbles and stuff because I used to think it was real, and I was like, wow, this is incredible. But I feel like, was it the 80s, like the golden era? Was it WWF at this point? Or was it even something before that?
One of the true forces behind the popularity of the sport was Hulk Hogan. Everyone wanted to be a part of Hulkamania, and the Hulkster had this generation of kids believing that anything was possible through the power of training, prayers, and vitamins.
I'm probably
If Hogan wasn't your guy, you may have been rooting for the Macho Man Randy Savage and the
Randy
beautiful
Savage.
Miss Elizabeth. MTV was an important part of the pop
So now we're getting into MTV. I didn't know MTV was going on for this long. The more you know.
culture of this time. During the channel's initial rise and 1980s heyday, it helped to kickstart the careers of stars like Cyndi Lauper, Madonna,
Oh.
and even Michael Jackson.
Oh, it does make sense because music videos started getting like popular in the 80s, didn't they? And I guess they became popular or more like frequent and more popular because MTV was airing the actual videos. I'm being stupid. I don't really know where I'm coming from.
In those days, they actually played music videos, so you would have to sit through hours and hours of videos until they played the one you wanted. Another pivotal moment came in 1983, when Michael Jackson did the moonwalk for the first time
Oh, really?
while singing Billie Jean, and it became his signature move. From that moment on, every kid in the United States decided they wanted to practice that backward glide, which looked deceptively easy when Michael Jackson did it.
Damn.
To look cool in school, middle and high schoolers across the country began tight-rolling their jeans.
What? See, people used to do this with their sleeves in my school, and I used to hate they'd like roll it up kind of like that until it's like really short, and it was just like weird, man. I never done it. What is this rolling up thing, man? People probably still do this kind of thing, but you don't see it very often.
Growing out their mullet and teasing their bangs to the sky with a can of Aquanet hair.
Yeah, see, this hairstyle is 80s in a nutshell. Athletes, whatever it is, I mean, you just whenever you see pictures from this era, the 80s or late 70s, 80s, you just see like the mullet, the curly hair, the just proper out there like that. Again, is it bangs? Is that what it's called? But yeah, man, you can definitely sense when the picture's from the 80s if you see a picture of someone.
Spray. These same kids would also spend hours listening to the radio and waiting for the local station to play their favorite song, all while resting one finger on the record button of the cassette player. There was an art form to crafting the perfect mixtape, as there was only so much time on each side of the cassette. The Sony Walkman made listening to these tapes easy if you were on the go. Otherwise, they would be a gift for your significant other. The California
Bro, everything from this era is so creepy.
Raisins were a claymation blues band that not only graced commercials and animated specials,
Oh my God.
but they also made it to toy stores and the fast food restaurant Hardee's. Not only could you get these collectible figures if you bought a cinnamon raisin biscuit from the drive-thru, but they also put them on lunchboxes, t-shirts, comic books, and posters.
What the hell? That is wild.
The 1980s had arguably the most memorable sitcoms of any decade, with shows like Knight Rider, Punky Brewster, The Wonder Years, Alf, and The Cosby Show. But when
Oh, the Cosby Show. Isn't Bill Cosby? I don't really know. Isn't he done a madness? I've never actually seen the show either.
it came to movies, there was nothing better than a John Hughes film. If you were a teenager during this time, you were able to relate to all of his flawed characters. being a lovable loser like Ducky was an achievable goal. Or maybe you too wore your insecurities on your sleeve like the girl next door, Samantha Baker. Movies like The Breakfast Club, 16 Candles, and Pretty in Pink
I haven't seen any of those films.
were so relatable for so many, and John Hughes was able to capture that period of time perfectly.
Wait, was Back to the Future from the 80s? Because I've seen clips from it, but I really do want to still do reactions to it. Back to the Future. Yeah, 85. 85, 89, 90, bro. I mean, I've seen clips from this film, but I know the concept, and I really do want to do reactions to it because I think it's just one of those films that I'll really love. But was that like the biggest film from this decade, or was there other films that he mentioned here that were a lot more popular during the times, and then maybe Back to the Future got more popular as the years progressed or something?
The fads and trends that were created during the 1980s are hard to beat. When we see them, we instantly recognize that they were part of a colorful decade that has started to make a comeback. These moments in time were for many the absolute best time to grow up. So let me know in the comments your own memories of the 1980s.
I'm excited to see one of these videos when I'm saying 2050 and it goes on the, if you grew up in the 2000s, you remember this. I'm sure that'll be a thing soon. But damn, there we go. The best thing about the 80s, no cell phones and no internet. Yeah, I feel like the internet is just the majority of people's big issue of the current era. This was 100% my childhood. Now I'm 47 and watching the world tear itself apart. God damn. I couldn't be the only teary-eyed watching this. It's actually hurt a little. See, this is how I'm going to feel about one of these videos when I'm older. Like, as you like age and you just grow up, you really, like, I already miss my childhood and, like, sort of what I grew up with and just what I sort of took for granted in those times. But obviously, I'm still young in the grand scheme of things. But give it 20 years and I'll be thinking, when I was 21, I wish I was enjoying it more, not looking back at when I was 10 years old and whatever. You know how the human head works, and we just think about all these things. But I've always said it, if I could relive one decade, it would be the 1980s. But there we go. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and if you grew up in the 1980s, please let me know just how good it was, and I guess, yeah, your favorite parts of it. But yeah, that's that, and until next time, like, subscribe. Peace.